So Parashat Vaera. We start with the words Vaydaber Elohim el Moshe v'yomer elav ani Hashem. So we have here Dibur ve'amira. We have first Hashem says Vaydaber Elohim, and then he says Vayomer. And when he says Vayomer, he says Ani Hashem. So we have two names of how Hashem reveals to Moshe. One, he says Vaydaber Elohim, that the force of all nature is speaking to him, and then he tells him, I'm allowing you to reach a level of understanding that it's not just how God performs himself in nature, but also, not but, and also, I am Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now, it's been so many classes that we have been explaining how the name of Hashem is being revealed in so many variations. So, before he talks about how Hashem appeared to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Hashem gives an understanding to Moshe that he is going to show Moshe a certain revelation, an outstanding revelation of how God is going to reveal himself with the words Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now, according to Sfat Emet and Arim, it says that the greatest name is really Yud Kei Vav Kei, even though we have many names to describing the way God reveals himself, yes, because all the names of Hashem are a description of how we receive God's revelation. Which means when we say the word Elohim, is Baal HaKochot Kulam. He is the owner of all forces that is being noticed in nature. When we say the word Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem, yes, this is the greatest of all names that can be attained in two levels. In one level, shows that God is controlling the universe above time, which means time doesn't play a role. That's why we say the words Hashem means Hava, Hoveh, V'yeh, which means you put it in all a continuum. There is no past, there is no present, there is no future, there is all of it. And all of it represents the way that God controls this universe above nature, and nature, even though has some connotation of his revelation, but there is a force which is above it. Also, we see the second level is that God reveals himself continuously, endlessly, infinitely, all the time, and can manipulate it whenever God wishes. Now we have another name to Hashem, and this is in the next pasuk, where it says, Vaera el Avraham, el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov be'el Shaddai, u'shmi Hashem lo nadati lahem. Now, Hashem also explains Moshe what happened in the past when he talks about the fathers Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And he says there that God appeared to them where they revealed God in which way, where it says El Shaddai. Now, what does it mean, El Shaddai? I spent many times in my classes that El Shaddai means the God who has told the world where he created it, stop, enough. I don't want you to expand no more. I don't want the world to show itself in other ways of revealing God's ability. So he made it like having kind of a boundary, yes? So that is really the gvura of Hashem. The heroic way of God to stop something that takes place and says, okay, I'm going to stop it now because this is exactly how I want the world to be in order for God's plan to take place, which means allowing human beings to have a free choice to intervene and create and work through just the way God has made nature. Okay, so now we need to know that the name of Hashem, where it says Yud Kei Vav Kei, He is the one who creates and makes everything as it is, which means it has a continuous life to it. So God, when we say Yud Kei Vav Kei, is the source of all life above nature. Where, when we say Elohim, it is the way God reveals himself within nature. Now, why is it important to pay attention to the names of Hashem in our parasha? So Sfat Emet tells us that in Parashat Vaera, and then the next parasha Bo, we are going to experience the 10 makot, the 10 plagues that God is going to show the Egyptians and Israel themselves, how he can manipulate nature within his own creation, which means when we use the word Elohim, this is the way God created the world. When we say, oh, Hashem is going to intervene now, we say God is going to take whatever he has created and show the world that even though nature, we can perceive it as something that was there, that there are forces and laws that cannot be changed. Here comes God in the 10 plagues and say, no, you are mistaken. The way it works is that I allow nature to be as it is, and I allow this nature to be as it is every day, which means that we may perceive it as, okay, that's the rules of nature and it cannot be changed. Comes the 10 plagues, and that's the whole concept of Yetziat Mitzrayim, that we keep praying it and saying it before we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, which means the Yichud of Hashem, and then we mention Yetziat Mitzrayim, because Yetziat Mitzrayim is a transformation and a deeper understanding of the way God created the world. And I'm going to go back to it in a second. So what I'm saying is that it's very important in this parasha that we will make the parallel between Aseret Makot, the 10 plagues, and the 10 Ma'amarot Shenivra Olam, the 10 Vayomer Hashem Yehi Or, Vayomer Hashem, yes, all those 10 words that God has created the world from. Then we jump into another 10, which is the 10 commandments. And the Zohar and Sfat Emet see a parallel between those three. And what do they say? Now, before we come to understand how exactly it is, we still have to understand that Moshe, Hashem comes to him and he tells him that I want you to be the Shaliach, to send Am Yisrael out of Egypt. Now, in Pasuk Tet, it says that Moshe spoke to Israel, Vaydaber Moshe Ken, which means precisely as God told him, El Bnei Israel, to Bnei Israel, Velo Sham'u El Moshe. And they could not hear Moshe. Why? It says there, Mikotzer Ruach u'me'avodah kasha. And I want to pinpoint to the word Mikotzer Ruach, as Sfat Emet pinpoints it for us as well. So what does it mean, Kotzer Ruach? Which means the spirit was not a calm. They were so low in their spirit that they could not even listen to someone. So, it's like when someone is under a lot of stress and you want to calm them down or you want to give them some direction, and you feel that they're like have a stone that blocks them from being able even to not to listen, even to hear you, which is the two forms of way of speaking to someone. Yes, I can hear you and I can listen. The two different formats. And Chachamim tell us that Am Yisrael lo yachlu afilu lishmoa, means they couldn't hear, but nevertheless listen. And what was the reason? The reason was kotzer ruach and also avodah kasha, a very difficult labor. Now, when we see the word ruach, we have to come back the first time where we have the word ruach, and that is where we see it says in Sefer Bereshit, where God created man, what does it say? Vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim. That God flew breath into human being, their neshama, nishmat chayim. So which means that ruach is the spirit, is the neshama ateora shechelek me'eloah shatul bo, which means a part of this godly energy is breathed into man, into Adam, and ever since then we have that part that's called the neshama. Now the neshama, according to Sfat Emet, its strength, its inner strength, comes from two energies. One is ratzon, is a will, and second is machshava, which means a thought. Now, let's give an example. A person may have a very good thought, yes, as we say, machshava tova mitztarefet lemaaseh. A person may have a very grand, positive, beautiful thought to come up with some idea. And from the machshava, he slowly develops a ratzon, a will. And his will goes very, very, very far. Yes, like let's say someone says, oh, I wish there would be Bet HaMikdash. I wish Bet HaMikdash will be built. And then your ratzon, yes, if you attain that thought into your will and you say, what would I do if I could help build Bet HaMikdash? And Sfat Emet tells us that with that thought and the will, that is what God examines us. Not necessarily, even though the action is extremely important, because that's how you lead your from thought, your will to action. So speech and then action. Sfat Emet explains. He takes a pasuk from Kohelet that I've been also mentioning so many times in my classes. That Shlomo HaMelech says this fact. He says, "En tzaddik asher yaseh tov velo yecheta," which means Shlomo HaMelech gives us some kind of a fact about the nature of humanity and human being, that he can work through and work very hard to be righteous. What does it mean to be righteous? Means that he studies the Torah in and out and all around, all its parts, all its perspectives, and he follows the Torah. He follows the mitzvot to the T. He knows Shulchan Aruch. He knows exactly what needs to be done, and he's well versed with it, and he practices it. So that means that he's a tzaddik. On the other hand, it says not only that he's a tzaddik, it says tov, and en tzaddik asher yaseh tov. So we should wonder, what does it mean? If he's a tzaddik, of course he does tov, he does good. But Shlomo HaMelech comes to add another part of our humanity. Not only that the person knows the Torah in and out and he follows all the mitzvot, but he's also good in his nature, which means there's a refinement of character. Now, we all know that, there are people in this world where they're tzaddikim, they follow the Torah, but not necessarily they have a refinement of character, at least in all parts of characteristics. Yes, and we can put a whole lot in numbers of how many characteristics we are supposed to be refined, and each and every one of us, let's say, really follow the mitzvot to the T, and ask themselves, am I refined in this particular character or another character? And then we see that it's not so. And that's what Shlomo HaMelech says, En tzaddik asher yaseh tov velo yecheta. And it is not going to miss out. I'm not going to say the word sin as an interpretation, because the word chata in Hebrew, ze lachti et hamatara, which means you think that you hit the nail, but really you didn't. Like it went, let's say, instead of going straight arrow, it made, let's say, 90%, 80%, 70%, 40%. It's not 0%, but it is something. But you cannot hit exactly to the goal, when it comes to being a human being. What Shlomo is trying to teach us as the nature of being in this olam ha'maaseh, in this world of action, or as we call it also olam hatikun, the world of correction, is that by the nature, just by the nature that we are in this world, it is not possible to be perfect. We can perfect, we can work through, we can work hard, but we cannot be ever, none of us, perfect. And the same thing goes even for Moshe Rabbeinu. Because when Moshe Rabbeinu talks to Hashem, and Hashem comes to him when the snake, and he tells him, you are going to be the shaliach, Moshe shows a lot of resistance towards this service. And Chachamim tell us that every time he showed resistance, it was like kind of a, wow, you're missing out. You are lowering what is going to happen in the future. Because despite the fact that Moshe's neshama, as I explained to you, came from Olam HaTohu, which means a very, very, very high place, that only two personalities were created from the neshama, came from there, and that is Moshe and Hanoch, and I spoke about it in my previous classes. Not only that, when Moshe says to Hashem, "V'ani gvat pe v'gvat lashon," according to the Zohar, it doesn't mean that he didn't know how to speak. It means to say that he came from such a high level of connecting to God that he didn't know, how do I take something so godly? Yes, that I am devoted to God and I only know the language of God, the language of malachim, the language of angel, the language of only say, let's say, naaseh v'nishma, right? That is where Am Yisrael got to that level only when they received the Torah, but then again, they fell into the earthly matter of that they have done a sin, yes, that they have done the sin of the calf. And we always wonder, how can it be those people who say, naaseh v'nishma, we shall do and we shall listen, are the ones who will follow that law? But that is exactly what we're trying to establish here. We're trying to establish that Moshe's neshama came from such a high place that he already was more attached to the celestial world than to this earthly world. And therefore, when he says, Kvat pe and Kvat lashon, I have heavy way of speaking, I don't know how to deliver it to this earthly world, because it is very difficult for me to do the transition between being so attached to God and then coming down to this earth. And we are talking about it when it happens to him when he's already 80 years old. Don't forget it, yes? Hashem appears to Moshe when he's 80 years old, which means that he has come to the level where he disconnected himself much from his bodily needs, and more he was in a very high level of spirituality, according to the Zohar and according to what Sfat Emet is trying to explain to us. So, but every time Moshe showed some kind of either resistance or weakness, it shows us that he was still, as much as he was the greatest prophet of all time, that there was some element of what? Of physicality. Some element where moving from one level to the next was very difficult for him. And therefore, there were few moments where Moshe failed to be the best he could have been. I wouldn't say it if Chazal didn't say it, yes, because Chazal tell us, Rashi brings it, when Moshe complained to Hashem when he went to Paro and he said, deliver my nation, deliver them, yes, shalach et ami v'yavduni, Paro tell him, who are you to tell me what to do? I don't know that name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. What are you talking about? Something like that doesn't exist in our Wikipedia. We only know the forces of nature. What we see exists, what we don't see doesn't exist. You cannot manipulate nature. Only nature within nature. That's all we can do. And obviously, Paro refused to listen to that possibility. But it wasn't only Paro couldn't listen to that possibility. Unfortunately, Am Israel couldn't either. And that's what we just said over here. Couldn't hear, not listen, couldn't hear Moshe. Why? Mikotzer ruach. And Sfat Emet says, what is this kotzer ruach? Low spirit, which means they were not attached to their neshama. They were not attached to that concept of machshava, as I said, because that's the machshava, and the ratzon. And yes, I have a will and I have a thought, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do it, and I will. You know how Hashem says to Eliyahu Navi, when Eliyahu Navi wants to do something for Am Israel, Hashem tells him, with that force, because Eliyahu was like a fire, yes, and he was willing to do everything. And Hashem sees the ratzon, sees his machshava, and he tells him, you know, I see that with this koach that you have, you can go 40 days without eating and drinking, and you could do something. Same thing for Moshe. When he goes up to the mountain, stays there, and with that energy, that it's zealousy for God and being attached to God, he becomes so powerful that he is above human nature, which we need to eat and sleep and drink and eat, yes, because we have to feed the body. But Moshe was not in that arena at all. He was way above. Despite all that, when Am Israel, after Paro tells them, oh, you lazy, you have time to think about freedom, I'm going to keep you so busy, you don't have even a second to think about anything but making this work and being a slave, because that's the mentality of the slave. No way to think. Only be obedient. Only follow the rules. Only again and again get up and work and work and work and work and try to lower your head because someone is going to hit you. Something like the abusive personality syndrome. Mm-hmm. They have no freedom because they are already subject of so much slavery mentality. So what happened is that when Paro says that decree to Am Israel, adding all over whatever they already had, they stone Moshe, they stone Aaron, all the 70 elders, Kenim, but really lost Kenim, yes, ran away, and Moshe was left alone. So when he gets out of Egypt, runs away, and according to the Zohar, he ran away for 3 months. For 3 months, Am Israel didn't hear from Moshe, because Moshe was really in a situation where he felt desperate, because nobody could hear his message. The 70 elders were not ready to hear him. They spread out because the wrath of Paro was such that he added more rules to the rules, yes, more labor to the labor, as we all know. And then Moshe converses with Hashem, and he says, Lama ha'ota la'am hazeh? Yes? I'm trying to. I want to find that web. Yes, Hashem tells Moshe, you know, he gives him the whole plan. He says, you need to know, Paro is not going to be cooperative. Paro is going to give you a hard time, but do not worry. This is exactly what's going to happen slowly. But then, this happened in Parashat Shemot, actually, where Hashem says, yes, Vayashev Moshe el Hashem, yes, we're jumping from this Parashat to Parashat, the previous one, because they are talking about at the same time, the description of what happened, but we have to go back to Parashat Shemot. In Perek Vav, Pasuk Kaved, it says here, Vayashov Moshe el Hashem, Vayomar. So Moshe comes back to Hashem after, they stoned him and all that. And he says, Lama re'ota la'am hazeh? Lama ze shlachtani? Why have you made Paro put more hardship on Am Israel, make them suffer even more? And why did you even send me? Means like Moshe for that second feels like the whole shlichut was pointless. Now Rashi says there something very important. He says, when he says, Lama hareota la'am hazeh. So Rashi says that in that moment where these feelings came out as a speech, not only as a thought, but as a speech, Moshe lost the ability to send Am Israel to Eretz. Which means if Moshe understood that God's plan is that when they get to the point of no return in the suffering, which means Pharaoh would send the decree, I'm not going to give you no time, and Am Israel will get to the point of total helplessness, that when the Geulah could have been a total Geulah. And then it could have been that we would not go through the destruction of the temples, and that maybe you wouldn't even have another exile. And that is a very deep, I hope I explain it correctly, but what we're trying to say, מי צריך אותו?
צריך להגיד משהו לאריק, לפרשת שבוע שלי, להביא את זה לפה ומפה.
אוקיי. So I'm trying to explain it in the clearest way possible. Moshe is Shaliach of Hashem, but then he goes down to the earth, and then he's going to Paro. And in the midst of all those things that happen, Moshe thinks suddenly from earthly way, not so much from up above, really like coming down. I believe that the transition of going from up to down causes to each and every one of us some kind of a dark place where there is a misunderstanding. How Uri Shriki says, for instance, that when we have an idea, so we spoke about the thought and the ratzon, right? The thought and the will. So that comes from the world that Uri Shriki calls it Olam ha'edeot, which means a world of so many ideals. Of a lot of ideals. Now, when you have an idea, let's say even you plan the idea, once it comes onto its earthly way, we lose something. There is a loss of something, which means it cannot come to the way we imagine. I think artists understand it better, because what happened, let's say you have a canvas and you have an idea how you want to draw a painting, and you really put all your heart there. But they say that the artist is never satisfied. You always know that it could have been better. Says one more thing maybe is missing. Every time he looks at it, he says, if I could go back, I would fix here and there and there. But then there's a moment where he says, stop, no more. That's it. That's the painting. It's the end of it. I'm not going to go back to it. But in the thought and will, there is always something like missing. The same thing here. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Paro, and he hopes that what he wants to transmit to Paro and to Am Israel will be that they will be open to take it in, which means that there is the giver and the receiver, right? In the world, we have givers and receivers. How many times the giver, as we say, the cow wants to milk the calf more than the calf wants to eat? Same idea, yes? So the giver wants to give, but it depends on the receiver. When can we meet someone that the giver and the receiver are at the same, in harmony? Very difficult to find it. It's possible, but it's different. Same thing here. Moshe he first comes to Paro with the 70 elders. But once the 70 elders hear the way Paro speaks, they spread out. They abandon Moshe. Now, it's true that Aaron goes with him, and we're going to talk in a minute about what's Aaron's role in all that. But the fact that those 70 elders disappear should teach us something about the mentality and the state of mind that Am Israel had, that the Torah tells us, שלא יכלו לשמוע למשה, couldn't even hear him. Nevertheless, listen, because מרוח צרה ועבודה קשה, and very difficult labor. And then when Moshe comes to Hashem, he still has a time to pause. Now Hashem spoke to him and told him this and this is going to happen, but Hashem didn't tell him everything. Hashem didn't tell him that all the 70 elders will disappear. Hashem didn't tell him that Am Israel will stone him. How Hashem get that from Moshe? Did we ever think about it? I mean, he did tell him that Pharaoh is going to harden. Don't be surprised. Prepare yourself. How come Hashem didn't tell him, prepare yourself, Am Israel is not going to listen to you so fast?
Because maybe that was part of Moshe's having to grow. His own having to grow and get better and get stronger.
Will Moshe find within himself the understanding that there is a process to a development of person to be ready, to be receptive? Remember, we are to be a receptive vessel. In order for us to be a receptive vessel, we have to empty our ego, yes, to remove our ego so we can receive greater things. And what happened here, that Am Israel, obviously, I'm not ready, they're far from it. And what's the reason? The reason is that the spirit was very low. They were so deep in Memtet Sha'arei Tu'ah, 49 gates of impurity, being in a culture for more than 210 years of inhibition, of suppression, of holding into Avodah Zarah as their forces of salvation. Then what do you expect from such people? Moshe didn't know about that hardship, because even as Moshe was young, yes, first he grew in the palace of Pharaoh, so he was in the other end of the coin. And even when he grew up and he was watching Am Israel in their labor, but he was a what? He was a watcher. He was only watching. He was not part of this slavery. He was only an outsider examining them. But not only that, I'm going to go further. When Moshe saw the two people fight one with one another in Parashat Shemot, and one of them, he caused him death. Yes, let's say that it was, according to some Mefarshim, that it was a kind of an accident. But then when he meets again two Jewish people who fight with one another, and one of them is putting down Moshe and looking and saying to Moshe, oh, now you're trying to kill me too? And then with that comment, the Torah tells us that was heard now on Paro, and Moshe now has to run away from Egypt. But then it says that Moshe said the pasuk, Achen noda adavar. Now, if you look at Rashi, what he says about those words, מה זאת אומרת, Achen noda adavar? Oh, now I got it. Now I understand what Moshe understood. Moshe understood that Am Israel is suffering still and in labor because there is something that is still missing in their refinement of character. Because rather than this person shows הכרת הטוב to Moshe, self-recognition, You saved my life. I'm sorry that I'm not fighting, yes, with my fellow friend. What did he do when Moshe approached him? Rather than taking responsibility, and rather than saying, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I shouldn't do it, what did they say? They tried to put the blame on Moshe and try not to victimize Moshe. So Moshe said, oh, now I know why you're still slaves. Because you didn't get it yet. Now, that's a very difficult statement. But that is exactly what Sfat Emet says. Sfat Emet says that if Moshe understood that the labor still becomes harder and hardest, is because the people have to come to the point. Which point? The point of sense of helplessness, which they are completely now vulnerable, and that when they scream to God, it's not just kotzer ruach ve'avodah kasha, it's not from being low in spirit, but really in a sense of rock bottom. Now, there is something about being in rock bottom. From rock bottom, all psychologists will tell you, you only climb up. And what Moshe didn't understand, that despite of all the hard labor that Am Yisrael had, because they had what we call a conditioning attitude, which means no matter what we go in life, if it's too repetitive, suddenly it becomes our comfort zone. And I'll give you an example that I see happens a lot when I go in the streets. Like people who ask for tzedakah. I see even young people, young, strong, that, and I've seen them already, not 1 year, not 2 years, it's like the past 20 years, let's say. I still see the same person doing the same thing. And I'm asking myself, did you ever come to a thought, I don't want to do that no more. Let me try to find a job. Let me try to do this and that. Nada, nothing. What's that? That's called conditioning. That's called being in a certain comfort zone that you cannot emerge from it. And that is the most dangerous for a human being that is the creation of God to be in such a state of mind. Because a human being was created to forever and ever evolve and grow. Yes, we may fall, but it's better to fall because your chances to rise up, as I said, from rock bottom, you only rise up, than to be in a stagnated situation. And Am Yisrael, and that point, when we said that they were in Tet Sha'arei Tum'ah, in 49 gates of impurity, what they're trying to tell us, that there was some kind of a format in their head, in the way they behave, that was so conditioning, they could not hear Moshe. Definitely, they could not what? Listen, which means there was a very thick wall that prevents them from opening up to such a possibility. And that's the one thing Moshe could not understand, because Moshe was standing on the very opposite end of growing and growing and growing and working on himself and being in a way where God could speak to him face to face, truth to truth. Face to face means truth to truth, which means total transparency about understanding this universe, how it should be worked, how it should be followed, yes, and that's the whole idea of receiving the Torah, yes, and giving us the Torah, because this is the blueprint of God, how this world can exist and will be in its best if society will follow this blueprint. And that it's Moshe who succeeded to bring us down to us, yes, nobody else, only Moshe could have brought that ideal into the earth, yes. And obviously there is a way more deeper understanding to whatever I say that Moshe succeeded to bring, or what was lost when Adam unfortunately has made the scene, and we lost all those levels of getting to the truth of God. But Moshe succeeded to come to the closest way possible for us to receive that blueprint where through that we are connected to God.
Ms. Alouf, I have a question.
Yeah.
So during Pesach in the Haggadah, when we say that if Hashem hadn't taken us out of Mitzrayim, us and our children and our grandchildren would still be slaves to Paro, really what it means is if Hashem hadn't aroused so that he brought us out of Mitzrayim, out of this conditioned state of wanting to stay where we were, we never would have come out of it.
Absolutely. And if you pay attention to that, we're talking about Israel. Unfortunately, for the other nations in the world, there is a lot of concepts of conditioning that they cannot get out of. Yes, in our 20th century, the way where Renaissance, Enlightenment, and then the revolution of the how do we say Atasiya, the technology revolution, and all those revolutions that's supposed to change the world, yes, and make a better world. Suddenly, all the nations, especially the European one, and not to talk about today, also the other countries, fell into a way where they had no hesitation to slaughter, kill, and create a Holocaust of their own citizens, people who served there and were devoted to their country. Yes, I understand. Most of the Jews of Germany, for instance, were completely assimilated, yes? But it's funny, you take these assimilated people and you tell them, no, you're not part of us. Means they couldn't take out their conditioning of Jewish hatred. Till today, they can't get rid of it, which means that's part of their conditioning. Exactly. But with Am Yisrael, God wanted them to get out of that notion 100%. But because of Moshe not willing really to see that, or not being able to see that, that part of the way that God has made Am Yisrael even more labored, more hardship, was to prepare them for the point where their salvation would be a total salvation and a total redemption. But because it happened prematurely, and because Moshe couldn't be in that level, yes, it's two ends, what happened is that Hashem tell him, according to Rashi, Ata tir'eh, which means now you're going to see what I'm going to do to Paro. Ata means now, but later on, when Am Yisrael is about to enter Eretz Israel, that's the first time where Hashem tells him, you failed. And therefore you, as you were supposed to be way more than that, cannot do it today, not this time. Maybe when Mashiach comes, but not now. Now, Yoshua will have to let Am Yisrael go to Eretz Israel. Now, we know that Moshe had a second chance. Okay? God always gives a person who made a sin a second chance. And that was Sfat Emet tells us. Sfat Emet tells us that when Moshe spoke like that, Hashem wanted to judge him with the attribute of judgment. But then Hashem saw that when Moshe Rabbeinu say, Lama hareota la'am hazeh, that his speech was full of mercy. That did not come from a bad place, saying to Hashem, how can we allow the Jewish people, Bnei Israel, to suffer more? Look at them. Their head is down. They have no spirit from them, and we are going to break it even more. And Hashem say to, obviously, he has moved his attribute of judgment to the attribute of mercy, and say to Moshe, okay, so we're going to have it, not first plan, second plan. Yes? First plan would be, as I explained, if Moshe and Am Yisrael were both in that ideal situation where they receive rock bottom and then they can get the highest way possible, which means going to Eretz Israel, never having exile, to the point where there will be more exiles. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of exile because I have spoken to you about it also in my previous class last week. And it's very important, even though we are now more than 8 million people in Eretz Israel, and definitely Shekhinah is here. The Gemara explains that if there are 22,000 people of Jews in one place, then Shekhinah is there. That's the minimum, yes? Now, obviously, Am Israel, all over Eretz Israel, we have so many people in every city, in every town, in every farm, yes? We have, Baruch Hashem, a lot of Jewish people, which means Shekhinah is here in Eretz Israel. Still, all in all, we need to know that Hashem told Moshe, told Yosef, told Yaakov, told Jeremiah that exile is part of God's plan. A. B. God is with Am Israel in exile. Shekhinah gola itam. Shekhinah means the way God hovers and dwells in Am Israel. Remember when we talked about Eheye Shelachani, yes? That God tells Am Israel, I am with you in your suffering. I see you, with you, I'm protecting you. And part of the plan is suffering. Because only through suffering, we are going to get to the goal. What's the goal? That Am Israel will free itself from Egypt and will understand that we, as Am Israel, are to teach the world the language of freedom, of making choices. Now, obviously, as we are freed from Egypt, we go straight to Mount Sinai, where there we become Avdei Hashem. We become the servants of Hashem. So as Rabbi Yehuda Levi says, Kol ha'olam avdei avadim. All the world, all nations are servants to servants, because that's the way it works in this world. Yes, there's always someone above us that tells us what to do. And then he says, V'rak Am Yisrael hu levado chofshi. And only Am Yisrael is a free nation. Free to what? Free to make choices. Now, when we talk about making choices, obviously, those of us who know that the best making choices comes where I make choice when I have my thought clears, I have in front of me a lot of information. Yes, so I take an educated risk. Taking a risk is making a choice, yes? So I take an educated risk, and I'm more likely because of that, that the chances that my choice will be excellent, good, productive, creative, whatever it is that you want to say, anything positive, is more likely to happen. So when God gave us the Torah, what did he give us? He gave us, in Sefer Devarim, God says, listen, I'm giving you life and I'm giving you death. I'm giving you Tov, what's good, and I'm instructing you what's bad. I'm just telling you. Means like God is giving us the Torah, and we need to look at it as a manual, as a blueprint, as something that, listen, this is the information in front of you, and then Hashem says, and I'm telling you, choose life. Now, what is life? Sfat Emet talks about it. Yes, he says that when we talk about getting out of Egypt, what God tells us, he tells us like that, Leman tizkor et yom tzatcha mimitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. That we are to remember exiting of Egypt all our days. And that's where Chachamim learned that we have to say Shema Israel, and that we have to mention it 3 times a day that we got out of Egypt and so forth. And also in Birkat HaMazon. Yes, in Birkat HaMazon, what do we say? Ve'al she'otzetanu me'eretz Mitzrayim. Yes, that we thank you, Hashem, we show gratitude that you redeemed us from Egypt. Ve'al she'betitanu mibet avadim, that you freed us from the house of slavery. In Ken, so what does it mean, Chai? So Sfat Emet tells us To be alive is to walk in the tree of life. And what is the tree of life? מה זה עץ החיים? Remember, in Gan Eden, what Hashem says to Adam, מכל העץ אכול תאכל, כן? ורק מעץ הדעת טוב ורע, אל תאכל, לא תיגע, לא תאכל ממנו. And then it says, ועץ החיים בתוך הגן. Yes, they mention in Sefer Parashat, you can open it and see, yes? ועץ החיים, the tree of life, is there in the garden. What is this tree of life? The tree of life was the Torah. Yes, עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה. We say in Tehillim, right? בכל תומכי המאושר. It's a tree of life. Tree of life is the Torah. Now, what does it mean when Hashem says, choose life? And I'm telling you, choose life. What does it mean? It means להיות דבוק בתורה. To be like internalized with all what the Torah is speaking about. That this mitzvah or that mitzvah will not be out of you. It is part of your identity. It defines who you are. Yes? It's like when you walk the way you walk, when you talk the way you talk, when you do this mitzvah or that mitzvah, everything you do is being internalized with your blueprint, with your manual. It's like a person is buying a washing machine and he knows how to work it already by heart. He doesn't have every minute to look at the manual and say, oh, which button should I press? Which cycle would I use? When will I put it from the end of the machine to the dryer? No, it's already known to us in a way where it's part and defined who we are. Same thing with the Torah. So Hashem gave us the 10 Commandments in Mount Sinai. And as I said at the beginning of my class, that it's parallel actually to what? To the 10 plagues, and it's parallel to what? To the 10 Ma'amarot Nivra Olam, the 10 words that God created the world with. What is the connection between the three? The connection between the three is that when God created the world, He's created it from nothing. After the world was created, now we create something, yes, from something, which means there is nature, and from there we produce and create and all that. But then, because nature works so perfectly, yes, the sun rises every day, the sun sets every day, the stars and the moon come at night, the trees are growing, the apple tree is growing again and again and again for thousands of years and million years, however number they want to give, it's no problem, yes. Only proves that wonderful way of system that God created the world. The cow is a cow, the monkey is a monkey, and human beings are evolving all the time because that's what God said. God says, Adam la'amal yulad, a person was created to toil, to evolve, to work, yes? Now, the problem became when God, Elim, when we say the word olam, world, right? Olam, there is a word hidden in it. What is ha'elem? מה זה ha'elem? Means like God hid himself. It's like in his so much will for us to exist and live and make choices that he has made a very specific plan in this creation that we as if don't see God. But really God is there. And he's there, as we've said in the prayer, b'chol yom mechadesh ma'aseh bereshit, that God is renewing the creation. Yes, v'yomer Hashem hiyo, v'yomer Hashem hiyo. It's like that voice is eternally is being voiced forever and ever and ever. That's when we say mechadesh betuvo, because of his God goodness that he is allowing the world to exist forever and ever and ever and ever. So we have God there, even though he's hidden. But then in Aseret HaMakot, Chachamim tell us, God has renewed the 10 words of creation because he had shown Paro and he had shown Am Yisrael, don't fall for it. Don't think that the world is only nature. No, there is a profound energy there that God reveals himself above nature, which is in the name of as we explained, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Then, once Am Yisrael were ready to redeem themselves from Egypt, in whatever level they got, that put them in another level, and that was the 10 Commandments. In the 10 Commandments, as we all know, Am Yisrael only were able to tolerate 2 commandments. The first one, yes, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeticha me'eret Mitzrayim מבית עבדים, that was the first command. And during this command, their neshama came out, yes? When the neshama came out for a split of a second or whatever time that God gave the neshama to be out, that second, Am Yisrael were exactly in the same place of Adam before the sin. Yes? Nistalkamem zohamat anachash, which means the impurity of the nachash. And what is the nachash? The nachash is Yetzer Hara. The nachash is the doubt. The nachash is Amalek. The nachash is the way to manipulate situations that you don't see the truth. Yes, as we all do all the time. Rationalize, deny, and other reaction, formation and projection. And we do all of those defense mechanisms only to escape truth. Because truth is too painful. Yes? Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, I need the כרגע, אני כבר מסיים. טוב מה? לא תודה. לא, גם אתה. So it's very interesting to see that in the 10 Commandments, God has brought Am Yisrael to the point where they were supposed to be, if they were in Egypt and accepted all the suffering, that they would be able to connect to God to that level. But still, God gave them this opportunity again to as we say, seal the deal, that it will be imprinted in Am Yisrael. As we all know, we have it, yes, our outstanding and full faith in God. Yes, we all ma'aminim b'Hashem. As we say, Am Yisrael ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. Which means even when someone holds our throat and tell us to do something, we will say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Means that mark was given to us where? In the first Dibra. The second Dibra, Hashem says, Lo yeh lecha elokim acharim al panai. During the second Dibra, Am Yisrael, almost their neshama came out, but then God made sure that it will stay within the body. Why? Why God wanted the neshama to stay within the body? Number one. Number two, as we all know, immediately Am Yisrael go to Moshe and says, no more we want to hear Hashem. He will speak to you and we shall do and we listen to whatever you instruct us. That's it. From now on, it's finalized. What happened that Hashem forced the neshama to be in the goof? So Chazal explained to us that Hashem is telling Am Yisrael, I have no desire for you to love me and to be my servant when you're not in your body, because I have enough angels up there. I want you to be with your body. I want you to be with your boundaries, because the body is the boundary. And I want your neshama within the boundary to connect to me. In what sense? As I started my class, with machshava and ratzon. I want you first in your thoughts to continually think of me, be with me, want to connect with me, and show a will. And I want that will to be genuine. So Sfat Emet tells us, the more genuine the ratzon to connect to God, that's how God appears to us. That's how God creates miracles to us. So it all depends on what? On two energies. Our thoughts and our ratzon, and our will. Because when it comes to action, us as human beings, we fail. We don't do it perfect. We cannot do it perfect. It's impossible to be perfect. And always work on my perfection. Yes, I can perfect something. I can do, instead of, let's say, 80, 85, I can do 90, I can do 92, 94, 95. Some of us, wow, reach even to 98, yes? but there is no 100. And God knows why God accepts that it's not going to be so, because that's the way, the format God created man. He's not interested in the 100. He's interested more than the action, even though the action is very important. He's more interested to see how we are devoted in our thoughts and in our will. That's why the Mishnah says, "Aseh retzono retzoncha." Can you aim the will of God to do your will, even though before you have your own thoughts, you have your own will. But can you connect to the will of God and stay there and try your best? Because it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be best. And how best you do that, that's how God reveals to us. So Am Yisrael was zocheh to see Aseret HaMakot, and Am Yisrael was zocheh to redeem themselves from Egypt. And Be'ezrat Hashem, next week, we will continue to elaborate on it. But I believe that today we got to understand more the depths of what was the experience of the exit of Egypt, what privileges and responsibilities hand in hand it gave us as to be the nation who knows how to use its free choice, hopefully in a good way. Thank you so much.